be here this morning, but she is in a lot of pain, so pray for Miss Trudy as well. All right, Matthew chapter number 4, starting in verse number 8. It says, "And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go," no, that's chapter 2 actually. Chapter 4 is on the other page over here. Well, here we go. All right. "Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain." I remember this now. "And showeth him all the kingdom of the world and the glory of them. And saith unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me." Now let's pause there for a moment. Y'all remember, well, some of you may remember, some of you may not have been here for the AM hour for the last 2 weeks. But we talked about what worship is. Worship, from Genesis to Revelation, includes this thing of falling down before the one you're worshiping. And that's part of the DNA, if you will, the makeup of the word worship. It means to humble yourself before, and almost without fail, it's a physical falling down as well. And again, as I've said, worship, does it require you to fall down to worship? Not require in that sense of the word, but it's such a part of the makeup that there is a humbling there is a lowering of yourself. And there's so many religions in the world today that still include that, and there's some that don't. And those that do often are worshiping images and idols and other people and all kinds of things like that, and it has so much turned off those that don't do that physical worship that they have this almost holier than thou perspective. Y'all are bound down to idols and we don't do that kind of thing. And as a result, we don't tend to worship at all. That was the point of the messages the last couple of weeks. And in fact, it is a good thing. When I left the church that I was raised in, a worshiping church, but a worshiping of statues and historic individuals that have long since passed and the like that, there was a lot of worship, up and down and kneel and stand and sit and, just all kinds of that thing going on, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And when I left there, I thought, no, all I did was bow down to these statues and these people and rub these beads and chant different chants, mantras as they're known in other forms of worship. No, I'm not going to do that. But as I'm studying this thing of worship, I think, you know what? My resistance to bow to such as that is right. But that has caused me to swing so far to the other way that I'm not sure that God even would say that I worshiped him even after that. And so we need to strike a balance. Anyway, I'm going to move on because I'm going to get distracted preaching about this thing called worship, and I've already done that. You can listen to the messages on YouTube. And so, back in chapter 4 here, Satan is seen here before the Lord Jesus Christ and saying, I'm going to give you everything that you can see if you will fall down and worship me. Verse 10 says, Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God. All right, we should worship him, nobody else. But notice this next phrase, and him only shalt thou serve. And I got to thinking and meditating on this thing. Satan says, I want you to worship me. And Jesus says we should only worship and serve God alone. The more I meditate on this and the more I think about this, the more I realize that worship and service cannot be separated any more than worship and bowing can be separated. What you worship, you will serve, and what you serve, you are worshiping. You cannot dissect those two things. All right, now, I don't know about you, but that causes a little upheaval in my soul. That causes me to go, I don't like what that implicates. I don't like what that means. That's got a roughness to it that I'm uncomfortable with. What you worship, you will serve, and what you serve, you will worship. So the question that that I've asked myself, and I hope you'll ask yourself this morning is, what am I worshiping? All you got to do is look at what you're serving or whom you're serving. So what are you serving? Well, what are you bowing to? What are you worshiping? What are you surrendering your life to? Okay? Satan sought to be worshiped, and Jesus revealed that worship is not a one-time act. It's not a one-time thing. You bow to the one who is your master. You surrender and you yield and you humble yourself in service to the one you worship. Now, I want it to be real for you. I want it to be practical. I want it to be helpful. And I hope that you will grab a hold of this the way it's grabbed a hold of me. And I hope that you will allow it to... Have anybody ever touched an electric fence? Anybody ever want to do it again? All right. If you've touched an electric fence or it's touched you, you know it. You haven't forgotten the experience. I hope that this will do that for you, but not in a painful way, but in a way that will make you look back on it and go, oh yeah, I know what that's about. All right? Eye-opening. Soul-changing. I mean, I really hope that we can, and all right, well, anyway, let's move along. I'm praying for you, and I'm praying that I can communicate this well. I want you to remember a couple of things as we consider this thing of worship service, all right? And I use those two terms. I call this worship service because most churches call their AM service their worship service. But there's very little worship and there's almost no service. Now, let that meditate in you for a minute. Ruminate on that deal. Very little service and almost no worship at all. Okay? What we have come to realize or think of as worship, this whole kumbaya stuff, right? And I love singing. Y'all know that I do. I torture you with it every week. But that's not worship. It's praise, but it's not worship. Okay? And if it's not enjoyable to God, it's neither worship nor is it praise. It's noise. Oh, sorry, did I say that? Yeah. Anyway, I have to move on. I will get distracted if I continue that line of thinking. I want you to consider some things. I want you to remember some things. I want you to turn with me to Matthew chapter number 6. And I've tried to stick to the book of Matthew this morning as much as I can and just show us some words of Christ. We're going to bring some other passages into it, but Matthew chapter 6, I want to remember a lesson that Jesus taught here in Matthew 6, verse 21. Matthew 6, 21 to 24. He says, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. For the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thine whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness?" Notice verse 24. "No man can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than meat, and body more than raiment?" Now, I want you to notice in this context of worship and service, he says in verse 21, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Okay? Again, that's like I said earlier, what you worship, you will serve, and what you serve, you're worshiping. Whatever that happens to be. For some people, it's work. For other people, it's sports of some brand or another. For some folks, it's some form of entertainment. For some folks, it's some activity, some hobby. For some folks, it's a person or personality. For others, it is some kind of ideology. Whatever it is. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Notice verses 22 and 23. And just think about it in this context. What or who you love most, you will serve. Whatever it is that you love most, you will serve, whether that be the God of heaven, or the God of money, or the God of sports, or the God of activity, or the God of self. What you love most, you will, actually, back up. Look at verse 22, 23, and let me give you this thought. If thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be, 22 and 23. I'm going to get this right. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Where your gaze goes, there your heart's going to go. And what do I mean by that? Well, in verse 21, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Number 22 and 23 there, he talks about our eye and it being whole or it being evil. What you're looking at will determine what you are on the inside and where your love goes, where your service goes. Whether that's sports, whether that's fishing or hunting or whatever it is. Whatever you're looking at. It used to be, back in the day, they sent out catalogs. Sears and Roebuck was a big one. And people would get that in the mail a month or two before Christmas, and they'd begin looking through that thing, window shopping. Today, we got something better. We got Amazon Prime. And all kinds of other ways we can do that, right? Where your eye is focused, that's where your heart is focused, and that's where your service is going to be focused. And then in verse number 24, notice verse 24, no man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. What you love most, you will serve. The God of heaven, the God of money, the God of self, the God of entertainment, whatever it is. So this question came to my mind as I was meditating on this. What does serving God look like? We've examined for a couple of weeks what worship looks like by God's description. Now the question needs to be, in this thing of worship and service, because they go together, what does service look like? And again, in Matthew chapter 24, the Lord taught on this and mentioned something here that I think is relevant and needs consideration, starting in verse number 45. What does serving the Lord look like? Or rather, maybe we should ask it this way, what should it look like? How many folks have a perspective on serving God that is not accurate? Now think about that. Consider the Apostle Paul. Actually, let's consider Saul of Tarsus. He had a perspective on serving God that said, those people following that Jesus freak need to be put to death. He thought he was serving God, people. Now, you can fault him for his actions, and you can fault him, but he was zealous, in his own words even, for God. And in his mind, it was the God of heaven. But his view of service and what that looked like and what that meant was totally false. More on that later. But that just, again, I just want us to really consider this. Oftentimes, again, growing up as I did in a religious environment, I was taught that serving God meant something. We're going to go to serve. We're going to have this activity, and we're going to consume something that's going to turn into flesh in our mouth, and drink something that's going to turn into blood in our mouth, and that's serving God. Okay, I have a completely different perspective on that now. But worldwide, 9/11, those people were serving their God. Right? The people in the Middle East, even to this very day, serving their God. From their perspective, they are doing absolutely everything in their power and doing it the way that they believe it should be done to serve their God. All right, now, again, my point is this. What does serving God look like? What should it look like? And again, this does depend on what God you're serving. This does depend on what God you're serving. But we are in a Christian church with the Christian Bible, worshiping the God of heaven, the creator of all things. So what does service look like? What does that supposed to look like? Verse 45 in Matthew chapter 24. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour when he is not aware, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There is two servants in this story, in this teaching, in this parable here, that the Lord is talking about. One who his Lord finds doing something that's pleasing. The other is found doing something that is not something that would be called service to God. And so I'm going to give you some aspects or some views on service from this passage. First of all, serving the Lord is serving His servants. Here's aspect or view number one from this passage, from the Lord's perspective. Serving the Lord is serving His servants. And when the Lord returns, He will bless those who He finds serving His servants or serving others. That's what service looks like. Serving others. Giving meat in due season. Meeting needs of the other people. Look across the page or to the next page, Matthew 25, and consider verses 34 to 40. Jesus says this, Then the king shall say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat, and I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in, naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of one of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Do you notice? Do you see? Does that help us understand, bring into view and bring into focus what service is? Not from our perspective, but from God's perspective. Service means serving those whom He loves, those that are His followers. What's the difference between the sheep and the goats? The very next, beginning at the very next verse. Those on the left hand, He says, Depart from me into everlasting fire. This is basically another telling of what He says earlier, and another rendition of the same thought and the same instruction. What's the difference between the sheep and the goats? From enter thou into the joy of thy Lord, to depart from me, ye wicked, and everlasting destruction. What is the difference? It can be seen in their service. The same difference can be seen in what we're reading here in chapter 24, verses 45 to 50 there. And that evil servant that says the Lord's going to delay His coming, and he's smiting his fellow servants, and he's eating and drinking and getting drunk. And that servant is sent away, appointed his portion with the hypocrites, and where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Remember the talk that Jesus had with Peter after He rose from the dead, and He was there on the shore after having fed them fish that they didn't have to catch? When He said, Peter, do you love me? Yea, Lord. What did Jesus say? Feed my sheep. Serve me. That's what service is, folks. That's what it is to serve the Lord. That's what it means. That's worship. Is to say, you know what, there are things that I might want to do. There are things that appeal to me. But I'm going to set those down. I'm going to lay those aside. And I'm going to wash somebody else's feet. That's service. Do you see and do you understand that there's very little worship service in the worship service? Because there's almost no bowing or surrendering. People don't even come to the altar anymore much to say, Lord, you spoke to my heart. I agree with you, and you're right and I'm wrong, and please forgive me and help me. And they get up and go on. We don't even do that much worship. But what's service? Where's the service part? Who are we serving? Okay. Now, truthfully, much of what happens in the worship service is you being served, the people who come being served. You're being fed. You're being given some food, some food for thought, and some instruction for action. Unfortunately, most of the times it's looked on fodder. It's looked on as folly. It's looked on as foolishness. The foolishness of preaching. Well, why would I want to go and do that? That's often how the preaching and the message is looked on. We have an opportunity for worship when we say, Lord, that message, man, that spoke to my heart and that showed me some areas of weakness, some areas that, man, I wasn't thinking about clearly or correctly, and and get right with Him and say, I will take action and I will make changes. Service, feed my sheep. Let me give you another aspect of service. Matthew chapter 24 again, and look at starting at verse number 48. But and if the evil servant say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and I've kind of already talked about this, but let me give you the positive side of this, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants and to eat and to drink with the drunken. You know, the difference, the differentiation, the difference between 46 and 47 and then 48 and 49 is serving the Lord as being kind to his fellow servants. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, and be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. And again, this is a tarnished coin in our collection. And what I mean by that is, how many times have you heard or even felt or had somebody tell you or exclaim to you, well, I'm not going to go to the chain church that if they're going to come to this church, I'm going to go to a different one. Hello. Be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Well, they offended me. Forgive them. Forgive them. Be kind. Be tenderhearted. The soldiers drove nails in Jesus' hands. And then he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You know what we often say or feel? They knew exactly what they were doing. Woo-hoo. Jesus is laying there. They're driving the spikes, and he's saying, they know not what they do. Well, they knew exactly what they were doing. The reality, though, a lot of times is people do things that are offensive to you or me, and they don't know what they're doing. And yet, we know, you know what you're doing, and you did it. The second aspect of service is be kind to our fellow servants. The third aspect of service that I want to give you back in, now let's jump to Matthew chapter 25 and look at this thought. In verse 21 to 23, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And of course, you know about the third guy. He didn't do anything. He buried it and forgot about it. Said it's over there if you want it. The third aspect of service is this. A servant is fruitful and productive. I'm not going to spend much time here. I need to move on this morning so I can finish this. But the difference between the fruitful and the not fruitful, the accepted and the rejected, the one who served and the one who didn't serve, you know, the Lord didn't judge them. He didn't compare them between themselves. He compared them and He judged them based on what He had provided for them. You don't have to do what I do, and I don't have to do what you do. You just have to do something with what God provided you, and I have to do the same, something with what God provided me. So I don't have to look at you and go, oh, man, I'll never match up to you. By the way, you don't have to look at me that way either. But if we want to serve God, we need to start looking at what did He provide me and what am I going to do with it and about it. That's service. Let me give you a fourth aspect of service. And this one's kind of interesting. Romans chapter 1, verse number 1. We may come back, but in Romans 1:1, I want to talk about the Apostle Paul. And we all know that that's his second name, that's his God-given name. But Paul writes, formerly Saul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated in the gospel of God. I want you to notice that Paul calls himself a servant of Jesus Christ. And again, Saul was Paul. He started out serving a God of his own making. He said, why do you say a God of his own making? Because he made up what he thought God wanted him to, what God was like and what God wanted. He didn't get that from God himself. He got that from a God of his own thinking, his own liking. Like many human beings, we make up a God. And maybe we don't make it out of wood or stone, but we make it up in our own imaginations, in our own heart. Well, have you ever heard or maybe you've said, well, I just believe it's like this. Well, there's a lot of things that I just believe it's like this, but I have to compare what I think it is to what he says it is, and then I'll know what it really is. All right, we got to go back to the book. We got to go back to the book. And you know the story. He thought he was serving the God of heaven. But when Jesus met him on the road to Emmaus and says, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Well, who art thou? Well, I'm Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It's hard for thee to kick against the pricks. What he figured out that day was he was not serving God. He wasn't being nice to God's servants. He wasn't feeding God's servants. I want you to notice what Paul writes about himself in 1 Corinthians chapter number 9. 1 Corinthians chapter number 9, starting in verse number 16. And I really need to hurry, and I'm not interested in cutting this short, so listen faster, please. 1 Corinthians chapter number 9, I want you to look at verse 16. He says, for though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me, yea, woe is me if I preach not the gospel. Verse 17, for if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. What is my reward then? Verily that, when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge. That I abuse not my power in the gospel, for though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself a servant unto all, that I might gain the more. And so unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without the law, as without the law, being not without the law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without the law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I have made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this do I, for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Now I want you to consider a couple thoughts. In verse number 17, he says, for this thing I do willingly, for I have a reward, but if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. He says this, if I do this thing willingly. I want you to notice that service is something we must do willingly. Notice verse number 18, he says, for what is my reward, rather? Verily, when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge. I may make the gospel of Christ without charge. He goes, I don't want to charge anybody for this. I'm feeding, remember, I'm giving. And in verse number 19, he says, for though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all. Have I made myself servant unto all? Can I just tell you this? God doesn't make you serve. You've no doubt heard some say, well, man, if there was a God and He was a God of love, He would not allow certain things to happen. You've heard that. You might have even thought it or felt it. But if God made people do right, that wouldn't be service. That would be servant. That would be slavery. Let me get my thoughts right there. That would be slavery. God's not looking for slaves, He's looking for servants. And to be a servant, you do that willingly. You surrender that to God. You step up to that. You willingly do that, as Paul said. If God or anybody else forces you to serve, it will not be service, but rather slavery. And God's not interested in making slaves. He's not a God of slaves. He's a God of service, servants. I want you to go back to the Gospel of John, chapter number 12 with me. John, chapter number 12. And I want you to notice with me verses 25 and 26. John 12, verses 25 and 26. Says, Jesus again speaking, he that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, now I want you to notice it says, if any man serve me. Again, he's not going to force us to serve. It's an opportunity to serve, as Paul found out. If any man serve me, it's a question. Let him follow me. Here's what service looks like from God's vantage point. Here's a view of service that we need. If any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now consider that thought. If any man will serve me, the word serve there, to attend to wait upon. He says, if any man serve me, let him follow me. The word follow, as we've well defined in the past, to accompany, to be in the same way as. Or another word for it is mimic, which means to copy. Jesus says, if you want to serve me, you need to accompany me. You need to go the same way as I am. You need to copy me. Now let me ask you this question. What way is Jesus going? What was it that Jesus did that should be mimicked or copied? He served, did he not? Philippians 2, verses 5 through 7. This will be our last verse. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 7. It says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself," verse 7, "made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in the fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Wherefore God also hath highly exalted him, and given him a name above, which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, and of things in heaven, and things in earth, and things under the earth. But made himself." Again, he wasn't a slave, he was a servant, and he chose to be that. Made himself of no reputation. Took upon himself the form of a servant. That's the way Jesus went. That's what we should be mimicking. So again, I ask us the question, who or whom or what are we serving? And that answer will reveal to you what you're also then worshiping. Sometimes and by the way, a thought, and I don't, here's a thought for you. I'm just going to put this on you as we close. We all want to be in line for a promotion. We'd all like to hear that, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." To get in line for that, you have to get into the servant house. You have to get into the servant line. You need to join up with the servants. That's what Jesus did. He came, made himself of no reputation. And again, what did Jesus do throughout his earthly ministry? What he didn't do was this. He didn't show up at the temple and say, "All right, everybody, all right, I'm here now. Y'all need to come and listen." He didn't do that. When he started his ministry, he started by serving people. Everything he did, you could identify or associate it with service to somebody. And I want to suggest to us, if we want to be successful as individuals, and if we want to be successful as a church, we will begin serving, looking for opportunities to be a servant to someone. Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you for your love for us, and thank you that you were a servant for us, and you sent Christ to become a servant for us to demonstrate this truth. And I pray that you'd help us to mimic, to follow, to get into the promotion line, to hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Help us to be faithful in our service and in our worship. And might it be true worship, and might it be true service, and not something we've made up in our own minds and imaginations. We ask for your grace, your mercy, and your help for this next hour. I pray that you speak to hearts, guide and direct our souls. Might you save somebody today, I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.